Good morning, everyone. A lot have been discussed, I think, in the inaugural session on EV, and I think after Navin Munjal discussing about EV is something that I can do, but I think with less in the Indian market than of course he has. So I'll take you through maybe what are the challenges which are coming even before, let's say, the EV gets to a point whereby this is a vehicle that we own, all of us, outside. But I'll come also to the EV. I'll first start talking about, of course, India. We know that we are the world's largest two-wheeler market. If you look about since 10 years back, I mean, the market has more than doubled. And if we look what is a year of, let's say, ahead of us, it's going to be even bigger. Because the market is so big, because there is so many people which still don't have access to mobility. So the number one key challenge that we have currently ahead of us is basically accessibility. So when we look, we had a series of, let's say, challenges, be it, let's say, on price and margin. So I'm talking about commodity inflation, talking about weakening of the rupee, but more importantly, all the disruption which happened from a regulatory front. Yeah? So the insurance hike that happened quite recently. Now we're on the verge of converting the entire two-wheeler markets, let's say, from to CBS or ABS. So you're talking about a price hike which is quite significant. And then, of course, we're just about a year before the BS6 challenge, or BS6 wall, I would say. So, and the step is basically for, if I look at the average of the two-wheeler market, you're talking about more than 10,000 rupee on an average for the entire market price increase that will be happening in less than 2 years. So that's basically the quantum. And why is that a challenge? Because when we look at India, I mean, two-wheeler, we play a huge part in terms of providing mobility. And the challenge that we all have is that we need to keep this mobility accessible to everyone. So that's basically the number one challenge, which is very, in a short-term basis, but we shouldn't forget. We've talked about BS6. I'm sure you're quite familiar, but for me, I like this chart because it shows basically the amount of improvement all the ICE engine have been achieving over the recent years, and more importantly, the leapfrog that India have taken on itself to basically be now at the forefront of regulation. On one side, we have among the worst and the most polluted cities in the world, and at the same time, we've been able to take the leap and say, okay, from now on, we're going to be even like as much as a year ahead of Europe for two-wheeler in terms of Euro 5 emissions. So at that time, we'll be able to not only have the technology capability, but also the cost advantage of India to export them to the world, in contrary. And one challenge that I was discussing also a little bit before is it's a challenge for the OEM, but we shouldn't forget the ecosystem. The same way that before you were stopping on the roadside to your roadside mechanics for, let's say, some quick fix or some breakdown, the guy will have to convert from a basically screwdriver to most likely, let's say, onboard diagnostic type of tool. That's also one of the leap which is not only on technology, but it's also on learning and training, which will happen. So, but enough on just about technology. The way the market is changing is also in terms of the format. I represent, let's say, the scooters, let's say, like a tree which is growing. And at the beginning, the trunk was mostly, let's say, we all know, basically one scooter, 110, that was the belly of the market. And now you're starting to see branches. If we look in the recent, let's say, 4 years, the core commuter 110cc have started to flatten a little bit in terms of growth. It's still there, but you see diversification. You see 125cc scooter growing. About a year and a half ago, 125cc scooters were basically two offer. You had a choice which was extremely limited. Now you have at least 6 valid competitors grabbing for share that you can have in all form of color and shape. So that's one of the things that is going to happen is over the next years, you'll see also scooters offer as diverse as we have today in motorcycle, from category of premium to down to entry. That's on the quantitative side, but when we look also, the user of those models, the buyers are going to change. So scooters, we know, are led by urbanization, but it's also led by women empowerment, joining the workforce. And one interesting fact that you should know is, over the last 4 years, the volume of women buying scooters basically has increased by 50%. The ownership in terms of women for scooters is increased by 5 percentage points. So the way that you address to your buyers is going to change, as well as also the scooter format you're going to provide. And this urbanization is going to fuel other markets, other segments. What happens when you have more urbanization? You have better roads, better road quality, better road connection. So that means also the premium segment is going to increase, not only in terms of volume, because for the last 5 years, the growth rate was around 26% year on year. But where it's going to increase also, it's in terms of the offer. More than 40, let's say, premium models, upper premium. When you look in 2014 and maybe in 2019, we are at more than 70. Yeah, so it's almost doubling in terms of the offer, and the more the offer, also usually the segment grows. So, I mean, I didn't copy what Navin Munjal said. He said it exactly, and this is the title of the presentation. So, EV is not a question of if, it's really a question about when, and that's basically the million-dollar question. When we look, we should always try to understand where it happens in the world. For that, it happened first on four-wheeler, but the EV in terms of mass manufacturing just happened less than, let's say, 9 years ago. Started with companies like Nissan, Mitsubishi, and then 2 years after, like Tesla. But in terms of the market, when you look, most of the market started with an ecosystem from an incentive to the consumer about 10 to 20 years ago. Why it took so much time for some of them and why it will take less time for India? Because at that time, there was no technology and there was no offer, barely nothing. Now this has evolved. Doesn't mean that it's still going to happen in 1 or 2 years. I concur the forecasts that were presented by Amitabh Kant and saying that roughly 2024, 2025, the purchase cost of an EV is going to be at par with an ICE, and that will be one of the major tipping points. But before that, what is coming is basically an offer. This is why, for me, what is important and what is good is to have companies like Hero Electric, Ether, and any other OEM joining the EV. Because the market is not going to grow unless you have offer. This is proven, yeah? EV mass manufacturing started in 2010 in automotive. It started to grow only after Nissan, only after Tesla entered the game, only after big companies, BMW and so on, entered the games. And that's what is going to happen also for all of us. It's about the offer also that should be competitive in terms of range, so that consumer can actually reach their final destination, can do that at a sufficient speed. And this is linked to the technology. So one, which is about, of course, cost, so that the cost of the battery becomes competitive at the level of an ICE range. It's about also battery chemistry, energy density, so that for a certain size of the battery, I'm able to have basically a usage which is similar to an ICE vehicle. Because at the end, it's about no compromise, that should be. But finally, of course, it will be about an ecosystem. It should be about a range of incentive, and when I'm talking incentive, I'm not talking about monetary only, but incentive that for an end consumer makes more sense to use an EV vehicle. And whether it's about being able to be recognized, has some specific, let's say, lanes, has some free of charge for the tolls. So all of that, including, of course, the charging station, will make the EV happen at a much faster pace than in many countries in those worlds over the last 10 years. That was about, let's say, the long range. But of course, we should not forget that once again, India is a big market. So the growth of the market will still continue. There are still generations of people which are still awaiting to join the mobility in two-wheelers. If we look about the two-wheeler penetration compared to the GDP per capita, and if you plot the different countries, we're still quite far away from a saturation point of view. So the growth will still be there, and once again in the different category of the segments. So if I have to summarize, the new India we're currently witnessing is under making. And as much as there are challenges, as always, all the opportunities are ahead. Thank you very much.